I want you to think for a second about what freedom really means to you.
Oh, that is a loaded question.
Right. Like, if you had to define it right now, you'd probably say it's just the ability to do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Total autonomy.
Just the power to wake up, look at 1,000 different options, and make your own choices without, anyone breathing down your neck.
Nobody telling you what to do, just you and your choices.
Right. But what if I told you that exact definition of freedom, the one we basically build our entire modern lives around, is actually a trap?
It really is the ultimate human paradox.
It totally is.
I mean, we spend our entire lives desperately craving the freedom to make all our own choices, but we're completely terrified of surrendering control to anyone else.
Yeah.
And the ancient texts we're looking at today suggest that this absolute autonomy we're chasing is, well, the very thing that enslaves us.
And to figure out how that works, we're doing a deep dive into a massive stack of sources today.
A really heavy stack, honestly.
Oh, for sure. We're looking at this deeply fascinating theological essay by Frank Leo. It's titled Two Freedoms: The Freedom to Choose and the Freedom from Choosing.
And it's worth mentioning he actually lists his name in English, Chinese, Hebrew, and Greek in the text itself.
Which kind of gives you a hint about how scholarly this gets.
Oh, yeah. This isn't just a casual opinion piece.
No, not at all. We are talking deep linguistic dives into the original Hebrew scriptures, the Greek Septuagint, the Syriac Peshitta.
Don't forget the ancient Aramaic commentaries.
Right, the Targums. Plus rabbinic literature, all the way up to modern sermons.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But the mission of this deep dive is to explore one massive, kind of unsettling premise.
Which is?
That the freedom we crave making our own choices is what enslaves us. While the freedom we're terrified of, which is surrendering entirely to a higher power, is the only true liberation.
Which is just a terrifying thought for a modern person to process. We're so culturally conditioned to view any kind of submission as, like, pure oppression.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand this paradox, we have to start at the very beginning.
Literally the Garden of Eden.
Yes. We need to see what the original freedom actually looked like before everything went completely off the rails.
And when you look at the state Adam and Eve supposedly lived in before the fall, it's something our modern world would barely even recognize as freedom.
Wait, really?
Yeah, but according to the text, it was actually the highest possible form of it because they were entirely free from the burden of autonomous moral decision-making.
I want to break down the language of Genesis 2 for a second, verses 16 and 17.
Let's do it.
Because the original Hebrew paints a vastly different picture than, like, the Sunday school version of this story.
Oh, absolutely.
Usually, we imagine God acting like this stingy warden, handing down a restrictive prison sentence about what they can't do.
Right, a giant list of rules.
Exactly. But the original Hebrew construction, when God tells Adam what he can eat, is incredibly lavish. The phrase is ashaltu.
Such a great phrase.
It's an infinitive absolute followed by the imperfect tense, which I know sounds like dry grammar.
A little bit, yeah.
But in conversational terms, it's basically the most emphatic way you can say something in that language. It translates to eating you shall eat, or freely eat.
It's just an explosion of permission.
Yes.
Even the Greek translation of that text, the Septuagint, preserves that exact same emphatic generosity. The overarching message wasn't a list of restrictions. It was a mandate to just, enjoy everything.
It makes me think of, like, a toddler playing in a massive, beautiful backyard.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If there's no fence, the parents have to hover constantly, right? They're stressed, the kid's restricted because the kid might wander off a cliff.
Or run into the street.
Right. But if you build a massive, sturdy fence around the edge of the property, the parents can sit back, and the kid can run full speed in any direction.
Because the boundary isn't a prison.
Exactly. The boundary is the exact mechanism that creates the freedom to run without dying.
What's fascinating here is how the ancient Aramaic commentaries, the Targums, interpret this original arrangement.
Tell me about the Targums.
So the Targum Pseudo-Jonathan adds this really profound theological reflection. It emphasizes that Adam's eternal life wasn't based on his ability to make autonomous, independent choices.
Oh, interesting.
His life was based entirely on obedient submission to that single boundary.
So his whole existence basically depended on just staying inside the fence.
Yes. And the implications of that are huge. For Adam, the revealed will of God, the command itself, was the true tree of life.
Wow.
He didn't have to agonize over what was right or wrong. He didn't have to sit around debating the moral philosophy of the garden, you know?
Or weigh the ethical implications of his diet.
Exactly. God had already drawn the line. The essay calls this the freedom from choosing.
Man, when you frame it like that, I want you to consider how utterly exhausting decision fatigue is today.
Oh, it's paralyzing.
We are constantly overwhelmed. I mean, we spend an hour just trying to figure out what to watch on a streaming service,
Geely is charged.
let alone agonizing over massive life choices, career paths, moral dilemmas, politics. We're burdened by having to invent our own morality from scratch every single day.
It's incredibly heavy.
But the original human estate in this text was completely, beautifully free of that entire psychological weight.
But obviously that incredible setup didn't last.
No, it did not.
Which brings us to the great tragedy. If the original design was so generous and completely stress-free, we really have to ask, why on earth did humanity throw it away?
Enter the serpent in Genesis 3.
Right on cue.
The source material argues that the temptation wasn't just about, a really tasty piece of fruit. The true temptation at its core was about seizing moral autonomy.
It's the promise of power.
Exactly. The serpent promises them, in Hebrew, "Wiyem kaljon," meaning, "and you shall be as God."
The pitch was essentially, hey, you can become your own moral authority. You don't need the fence.
You can be the one who decides what is right and wrong for yourself.
It was the ultimate temptation to seize the freedom to...
But I have to push back here for a second.
Oh,
Because this is where my modern brain just starts to short circuit. Isn't wanting to understand good and evil fundamentally a good thing?
sure, we value education.
Right. We value critical thinking. We teach kids to question authority and make up their own minds. So why is the desire to be an autonomous decision maker seen in these texts as the ultimate cosmic tragedy?
It's a really valid question, honestly. We champion independence so much. But to understand the text perspective, we have to look at another ancient source, which is the Palestinian Targum.
Okay, what does that one say?
It offers this incredibly haunting addition to the story of Eve taking the fruit. It claims that when Eve looked at the tree, she didn't just see a piece of fruit. She actually saw Samael.
Samael? Wait, angel of death.
Yes, Samael, the angel of death.
Hold on. The text is saying she literally saw a manifestation of death standing right there.
According to this ancient Jewish tradition, yes. She saw the legal consequence staring her right in the face.
Oh.
But the text says she still chose to eat the fruit because it was desirable to make one wise. Now just think about the sheer psychology of that moment.
It's insane.
The desire for self-sovereignty, that absolute drug of being your own god, was so intoxicating that it completely overrode her instinct for survival.
Over a literal visual warning of death.
Exactly.
Wow. It's like someone looking at those graphic warning labels on a pack of cigarettes, the literal pictures of diseased lungs, and choosing to light up anyway.
That is exactly what it's like.
Because the urge for control, the urge to say, nobody tells me what to do, is just stronger than the desire to live.
And so from the very first exercise of it, autonomous choice was a freedom that chose death.
It wasn't an elevation at all.
No, it was a total nosedive. And that leads to the core argument running through all these texts. Humanity seized autonomy, but did they actually get it?
Did we magically become these independent, free-floating decision makers?
The sources argue firmly no. There is no independent republic of the self.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the texts introduce this concept that there are only two possible states for the human soul.
Right, there is no third option.
Exactly. There is no neutral zone where you're just the captain of your own ship.
The illusion of the fall was that we could step out from under God's authority and just be our own masters.
But the biblical and historical texts are absolutely unanimous on this.
Yeah.
You are either a slave to sin or you are a slave to grace. There is no third kingdom.
Let's look at the linguistic proof for this, because the wording in the ancient texts is incredibly specific.
Yeah, John chapter 8, verse 34, Jesus says, everyone who practices sin is a slave of sin.
And we aren't talking about like an underpaid intern here.
No. If you look at the Syriac Peshitta, which is this ancient translation of the Bible, they use the word atta.
And atta carries a very heavy weight. In the grammatical form used there, it means an owned possession.
Not a hired servant who can just quit at the end of the week.
Right. It means the sinner is literally the property of sin.
And the Greek text uses the word doulos, which is equally heavy. It means slave in the fullest, most legally binding sense of the word.
You don't just work for sin. Sin holds the title deed to your life. If we connect this to the bigger picture, look at how the Apostle Paul explains this psychological reality in Romans chapter 6.
Okay, I'm with you.
He talks about human beings moving from being slaves of sin to being slaves of righteousness. And the Greek verbs he chooses there are fascinating.
What are they?
He uses elephanthes, meaning having been freed, and duluthentes, meaning having been enslaved.
I remember reading about this. Both of those verbs are divine passives, aren't they?
Yes. Now, for anyone who hasn't taken a deep dive into Greek grammar lately,
Which is most of us.
fair enough, a divine passive means that the person isn't the one doing the action. An outside force, specifically God, is doing it to them.
So you don't free yourself.
No, God frees you. And you don't voluntarily, casually enslave yourself to God. God enslaves you.
It is entirely God's sovereign action.
Exactly. The Syriac translation of Romans 6 really reinforces this by using a causative reflexive verb form. It literally translates to, you are caused to be subjected.
Wow. It paints this picture of a force completely overpowering your previous status.
It really does.
It's not like you voluntarily submitted a resume, went through 3 rounds of polite interviews, and decided to accept a nice job working for God.
That is not how it works.
To use a modern equivalent, it's like a hostile corporate buyout, but it's a divine rescuing one.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You were owned by a corrupt company that was basically working you to death, and God sovereignly steps in, aggressively rips up the old contract where sin owned you, and writes an entirely new contract where he owns you.
The buyout happens from the top down. God didn't ask permission to buy the debt, he simply acted.
That makes so much sense.
And understanding that reality explains why the New Testament is so intensely, fiercely critical of anyone who tries to sell you the idea of absolute personal autonomy.
Right. There's a powerful warning against this in 2 Peter 2.9. The text talks about these people who go around promising everyone freedom, but who are actually slaves of corruption themselves.
The contrast in the Syriac translation there is incredibly stark.
He really is. They promise you, which means freedom, but they are actually docile slaves of corruption.
It completely exposes the great modern lie. The people shouting the loudest about the freedom to make all your own choices, the people insisting on zero boundaries, are often the ones in the deepest bondage.
Their freedom to choose was literally the doorway to their slavery.
And this terrifying idea that our beloved, fiercely protected free will is actually a trap isn't just a Christian New Testament concept.
No, not at all.
The ancient Jewish rabbis saw the exact same psychological reality when they looked at the human condition centuries ago. They recognized that humanity requires fixed boundaries to actually flourish.
There's this brilliant, almost poetic wordplay from the Mishnah, specifically Pirkei Avot 6.2.
I love this part.
It's talking about the 10 Commandments being given to Moses.
Yeah.
The text quotes the book of Exodus, saying the writing of God was engraved on the stone tablets.
Okay.
The Hebrew word for engraved is duri. But then the rabbis do this amazing linguistic flip.
What do they say?
They say, do not read it as duri engraved, but read it as duri freedom.
The profundity of that paradox cannot be overstated.
It's mind-blowing.
The rabbis are teaching that God's fixed, permanent, completely non-negotiable will being engraved on stone or inscribed deeply upon your own heart is the very definition of freedom.
The only truly free person in the world is the one who submits completely to the revealed will of God.
Exactly. Anyone fighting against it is just tangled up in their own bondage.
But I want to pause on that, because how does that bondage actually happen in real time? Like, how does our beloved autonomy enslave us practically?
That's the big question.
Because usually when we make choices, we feel pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
We feel like we're in the driver's seat.
Sure we do.
The Talmud Bavli has this terrifying analogy to explain the mechanics of it. They talk about the Yar Hara, which translates to the evil inclination.
The rabbis taught that this evil inclination starts out incredibly small and unassuming. They say at first it's like a spider's thread.
Just a tiny thread.
Yeah, a gossamer, practically invisible little thread that you brush away without even thinking about it.
But with every autonomous choice you make in the direction of your own desires, every time you indulge that inclination, you're adding another thread.
And the Talmud says that eventually that little spider web becomes as thick and unbreakable as a cart rope.
And when you map that ancient rabbinic teaching onto modern neuroscience, it is absolutely spot on.
It really is.
Every time you exercise your freedom to choose something destructive, you are actively burning a neural pathway in your brain.
You are strengthening the chains of your own habit loop.
The freedom to choose sin progressively destroys your physical and mental capacity to choose anything else. It is a self-annihilating freedom.
Think about any bad habit you have right now.
Oh, this hits close to home.
The very first time you do it, you think you're just exercising your freedom. You think, I can do this or I cannot do this. I'm totally in control.
But you do it again and again, adding threads to the spider web.
You carve that pathway a little deeper.
Eventually it becomes a cart rope.
Yeah.
Your brain is wired for it, and you literally cannot stop.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, were you ever really free to begin with?
Or did your free choice just build your own prison?
Exactly.
And that's sobering reality, that our will is fundamentally compromised and prone to addiction, is where the deep dive bridges these ancient languages and rabbinic texts right into the modern era.
Yeah, we see this exact theology echoed by two very famous, heavy-hitting preachers.
Charles Haddon Spurgeon from the 19th century and John MacArthur from our current era.
Spurgeon's bluntness on this is just so refreshing.
He did not mince words.
Not at all. He has this famous sermon called Free Will a Slave. And he basically gets up there and says, free will I have often heard of, but I've never seen it.
Spurgeon argued that the fall in Eden didn't just bruise human nature, it shattered it completely.
Completely beyond repair.
He said that by nature, the human will is held captive by sin. It has completely gone astray. Sure, you might have some willpower, but that willpower is always inevitably going to pull you toward your own destruction if it's left to its own devices.
He said, man is born to be a servant, and a servant he must be. The only question on the table is, who is the master?
Which leads perfectly into what John MacArthur teaches about that Greek word we talked about earlier, doulos.
Right.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. If we are all slaves to something, if autonomy is a total illusion, what does the gospel actually offer?
What is the good news here?
Exactly.
Well, MacArthur spent a massive amount of time studying that word doulos in his book Slave. He points out that it appears over 130 times in the original New Testament Greek.
It's everywhere.
And again, it does not mean a willing volunteer or an employee who clocks out at 5 p.m. It means exclusive ownership. It means complete, unhindered subjection to an alien will.
Right, the will of the owner. MacArthur points out that when you share the gospel with someone, you are essentially inviting them to give up their independence.
Which is wild to think about.
You are asking them to submit to an alien will, to completely abandon their personal rights, and to be entirely owned and controlled by the Lord.
Which, let's be honest, sounds completely terrifying to a modern Western person.
Absolutely terrifying, because we have bought hook, line, and sinker into the serpent's original lie that autonomy is the only way to experience life.
We really have.
But MacArthur reminds us that the gospel is an invitation to become a slave who is deeply, profoundly, and unconditionally loved by their master.
And that completely flips the paradigm on its head.
It changes everything.
The deep dive uses Galatians 5.1 to summarize this whole journey. In the Syriac Peshitta, Paul warns believers not to be yoked again to the old bondage.
Because freedom isn't the absence of a master, that's the mirage.
True freedom is being joyfully bound to the right master, the one who actually has your best interests at heart.
It's a return to the freedom from choosing. When you are yoked to Christ, you don't have to lean on your own incredibly flawed, easily addicted understanding.
You don't have to navigate the exhausting moral universe all by yourself.
God has chosen for you, and his boundaries are the fence that keeps you from running off the cliff.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring all these sources together. We've gone from the emphatic Hebrew of Genesis to the Greek of Paul, through ancient Aramaic targums and modern sermons, to prove one cohesive, undeniable point.
It all points to the same truth.
The freedom to choose. That lie whispered in the garden promises that you can be your own God, but it actually delivered you into the cart rope bondage of your own destructive habits and ultimately death.
While the freedom from choosing the gift of grace means surrendering your cherished autonomy.
It means having God's non-negotiable will engraved on your heart so deeply that you follow him completely.
And paradoxically, that total unyielding slavery to a loving God is the only state where a human being is actually perfectly free.
It completely dismantles everything we're taught about independence. And it's something you really have to sit and wrestle with.
It is. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, building on everything we've unpacked.
Be honest.
If every single choice we make out of pure self-interest is just adding another thread to the cart rope of our own bondage, what is one area of your life right now where surrendering control might actually be the exact thing you need to finally breathe freely?
Man, that is a heavy, beautiful question to walk away with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a hard look at the choices you're making today and ask yourself what master you are really serving. We'll catch you next time.